Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Marian White, and with me is my co-host, Ken Bialo. Ken, you were mayor in the village of Larchmont for 4 years. You were trustee on the Larchmont Village Board for 11, and you've just volunteered in so many other ways.
Yes. And you, Marian, the exalted trustee for what, 2 terms? 4 years?
Yes,
91
only
to 95.
4.
And then chairperson of the now defunct Republican Party, which we should
The Phoenix
say
will
grace.
rise.
I don't know about that.
Maybe we should try a tea party. Do you think that would go farther?
Yes, T-E-E.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm game.
Yeah, all right. Good pun.
Well, whenever we can, we like to start out talking about Furniture Share House, which
Yes.
has been around for over 10 years now and has made such a difference for people that are transitioning from a shelter to their own housing. And they get an apartment, but it's empty.
It is.
And so what do you do? And that's where Furniture Share House comes in.
That's right.
And I know that probably since the beginning, the executive director, your dear wife Kate, has had a program that's always beds for kids on Mother's Day. And that's,
It goes under various names, but yes, there's been a Mother's Day promotion.
Yes.
Probably around for, I don't know, 5, 6 years. Every Mother's Day, the idea is to ask people in respect of, in regard to, in honor of their mom to give a donation to Furniture Share House. And this year, with the new website for Furniture Share House, which by the way is available at furnituresharehouse.org, they sent around a note saying, your Mother's Day gift will be doubled.
That's impressive.
Double, twice as many beds. This is Beds for Kids is the name of the program this year. And there is an anonymous donor who will match bed for bed all the contributions that are made for Mother's Day that are to go for Beds for Kids.
Well, that's wonderful.
So
That's
actually
never happened before, has it?
I don't think we've had the match before. And I don't know whether it's corporate or individual, but it's somebody. And the way you do this is, now watch this, this is my technical skill. It's unbelievable. FurnitureSharehouse1word.org. You go to the new website, you will see a table or perhaps a pickup truck there. And on the first screen, it will say Beds for Kids. Beds for Kids Mother's Day campaign. Donate now, and there's a button that you can, this is really amazing stuff.
That's what I did. I hit the button.
I know, you can hit the button, and then you can make a donation, and whatever you give in respect of that the Beds for Kids campaign will be doubled by this anonymous donor. So I think it's great, and the website is great. It's really amazing. I have to say, the communications committee did
are a lot of work.
The communications committee did a brilliant job. And if I remembered all the names, I would mention them because the people who worked on this spent a year.
Well, this has become quite a sizable organization, isn't it? I mean, it's volunteers pretty much, but there seems to be more and more help or community involvement.
Over time, right, more people get to know what you do,
Right.
and more people hear about it, and more people become active. And so I think, it spreads out, and I think it has. And this website is only an example of just how sophisticated the communications aspect of it has become. But the Beds for Kids is basic. Kids got beds or kids don't got beds. And that's, the more you give to this campaign, the more beds there will be for the children.
Well, and then the other nice thing, not maybe from Kate's point of view, but there will be a gala in October. So
Yeah,
I really
October, I
love-
think it's October 25th or 26th, but we don't know where it is yet. We
Okay.
still haven't locked that up. So,
Okay, well, anyway, that's always a very special evening.
well, beds for kids.
Beds for kids,
This is
yes.
this is a chance.
do it now.
Press a button. What happens when you press that button, by the way?
Well, then it asks you for your information, but it doesn't take forever. It's just really two things.
Is it very fancy?
Well, when you give information, what's fancy? It's just a lot of blanks.
The name and address.
Fill in.
Mother's name.
Credit
Okay.
card number.
Got it. Okay, got it. All right.
Well, one year I actually did it, and I said to honor Kate. Well, she's the one that should be honored. She works so hard, you know.
I prefer roses. It's better for me to give roses.
Well, everyone needs someone giving them roses. So,
Yes, that's true.
well, so yes, please go to FurnitureShareHouse.org and donate.
Press the donate button.
Now, we had something exciting happen in Larchmont
did.
recently. We had a contested election,
We did.
which contested means there were 3 Democrats running for 2 two positions.
There were
It's
three.
not like there was a Republican
There
or
were
an independent.
3 people running for 2 Democrat positions. I think 2 of the people were registered Democrats and were endorsed by the Democrat machine. One person, I think, was a Democrat by inclination, but was not registered as a Democrat.
Oh, okay.
So there were 3 people, 2 people nominated by the Democrat machine and expected presumably to be elected, and 1 who wasn't, who was an independent and a non-affiliated voter. We call that, right? Remember the old days we used to call them nons. They're nons. They're not registered with either party. They're not registered as independents, members of the
Right,
independent
'cause that's a
party.
party.
That's a party. They're non-affiliated. So yes, and the 3 seats, and 1 was won by a Democrat, not a surprise, that had to happen. And the other was won by the non-affiliated person who was very active in the Preserve Larchmont organization before the election. Of course, now this person is a trustee, Sarah Bauer.
And so Bubba Finelli was the
Yep.
big vote getter, the high number.
Yeah.
So
Well,
congratulations to Bubba.
but they weren't high numbers, right? When we ran, there'd be
900 or something?
Yeah, there'd be 2,000 voters, 1,800 voters, 1,700
Right.
voters. This particular election, I think the number was something like 600.
Well, that beats 35, doesn't it?
Well, the last election, which was not a contested election, right?
Right.
Last year's election, which was not contested, had, I think it was 50 votes. 50 votes was the top vote getter. I mean, you could have.
Those poor poll watchers being from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m.
50
and
voters.
no one even comes in.
Exactly right. But they get free lunch and dinner.
Who pays for it?
The parties do. I
We
said the
used
parties.
to.
The parties do, but there are 2 parties. There's only one party. The party does.
The Democrats
The Democrats
pay
pay
for
for
it. Well,
it. Yeah, we
that's
used, remember
very
we used to
nice of
alternate
them.
years.
Yes.
We used to alternate meals.
But that was locally, and then when there were elections at a higher level, not at the Larchmont level, then sometimes I think people didn't offer, the parties didn't
I don't think they did. I
of
think
it.
the county paid or the state paid.
I'm not sure anyone took care of those poor poll watchers.
Well, that would be bad.
That would be bad, but anyway.
Yes.
So congratulations to Bubba, and we're so
Sarah.
excited. We're,
Yes.
her background,
Sarah's a lawyer. She was very involved in Preserve Larchmont. I think she was sort of the top person, so to speak. It's a volunteer organization, and it was basically an offshoot of the seemingly devil-may-care, helter-skelter building that's going on in the village of Larchmont, in an effort to say to people who live around the building sites and all across the village, if there's something here that you think you want to preserve, you got to get off your chair and do something about it, because the developers are happy to buy anything,
right.
knock it down, and then build to the limits of the zoning code or beyond.
And it's astonishing, we have now so many examples of the limits of the zoning code, and there's barely any grass.
Yeah, well, and I said this to an architect that I ran into in Foley's on Saturday. And I've said it before in this show, zoning code really has to be revised every couple of years. It has to be. Because after a couple of years, the architects become so familiar with the ins and outs. And it becomes easier for them when a client says, well, I need to do this, I really want this, can you do it? It becomes easier for them, the more they work with the code, to find the loopholes and the wrinkles, just the way life is.
There are loopholes in there.
And there's always loopholes and wrinkles. You can't provide for every single thing. You can't foresee every, there are, what, 2,400 private dwelling units in the village of Larchmont. You can't foresee everything that's going to happen all the time to every unit, and who's going to want to move here, and who has 6 kids, and who has 2 kids. You can't see this stuff. But the architects, and he agreed, it's in their interest to be able to be so familiar with the code that they know where the loopholes are and they can help. They help their client. That's what they get paid to do. They're very skilled at it, and they do it. So because they're so skilled at what they do, you have to apply some skills at updating the code. When you see something you don't like, and you talk about it with the zoning board and get other members.
You updated the code,
yeah, we
right?
did. But last year they updated the code, and they were very proud of this. The board was last year or 2 years ago. 17 different amendments. And all I could think of was, you know what? This is a lot of effort that you went through. You think you've closed the loopholes, but you haven't, because there are loopholes in anything and everything. So I ran into this architect, and he said, yeah, well, it's our job. And I said, I'm not begrudging it. It just, if you're a member of the public and you're interested in seeing things happen, it's hard to keep up with what the architects are doing. and the Planning Commission,
well, that's sort of their job, isn't it?
Yeah, in the way the village government operates. The Planning Commission is not the steward of the zoning code, that's the Zoning Board of Appeals, but the Planning Commission is the steward of, if you will, the environmental aspects of whatever it is that somebody's planning on putting in.
Okay.
So you're going to knock down a building, you got to get a permit. You're going to try and build something, you have to get permits, and the permits can be very detailed. You can't knock this tree over. You have to put 2 trees over there. Your drainage over here isn't good enough. The building is too tall. It doesn't fit. It's out of scale. That was stuff that we did in 2003, was this business of scale to the neighborhood. So it's their job to steward that. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people would agree that over time, that became a somewhat disused stewardship. There are a lot of things going on. There's potential for a lot of building.
Right.
And I don't know, there are maybe 60 or 70 lots in the village that you could actually build another house on. And there were a couple of these multiple house properties that the planning board or somebody approved, somehow got building permits or whatever it is. I don't think they had building permits. They had knockdown permits, demolition permits.
That lot near Turtle Park.
Yes, there's on Vandenberg.
Where 4 houses
Yes.
were approved.
Yes, and there's Ocean.
Nothing's happened though.
No,
thank heavens.
people get discouraged if things don't go bang, bang, bang real fast. And in the village, nothing has ever been approved by the Planning Commission quickly. It's just historic. We got involved in '91.
Right.
People were yelling and screaming about the Planning Commission then and the Board of Architectural Review and the Zoning Board. It's slow moving for a reason. You want to consider everything and you don't want to screw it up. So there were some of these big developments that were approved, and I think Preserve Larchmont was aimed at those, saying, whoa, wait a second. And then the school board comes out and says, well, we have so many children in the school system now that we may have to have flex zoning as to who goes to what primary school. So
that got everyone's attention.
That got everybody's attention because you might be in a zone for a different school than you thought you had paid to be in. And there are differences from one district to the other, just in terms of the demographics and in terms of the size of the houses, the scope of the property, and so on. So I think I personally think, I read when I saw Preserve Larchmont, I read it as much broader than just looking at these couple of bad judgments by builders and wannabe developers. Oh, I'll take this 1 acre property and I'll put whatever it is, 8 houses on it, whatever it is. It's really bigger than that. You want to have something worth preserving. You want to have something worth living in. You want to have a place to raise your kids that's similar to where, for many people, where you grew up. So if you want that, you have to get out of your chair and you have to do something about it. And I think Sarah stood for that. It was a standout for her was something needs to be done. And it's not just changes in the zoning code. It's being careful with what we do with our environment. We have a local waterfront revitalization plan that's been filed with the Secretary of State. I remember Phyllis Whitner did the first one, early 90s, maybe mid 90s. And I remember working with her. Phyllis was the dean of this stuff.
I remember.
Yeah, you didn't tell Phyllis what to do. Phyllis told you what to do. So, working with Phyllis on the renewal of the plan and the update of the plan. I want to say it was the late 90s. It might have been the early 00s. And that is pretty specific about what the people who voted for that plan, which, by the way, were the Village of Larchmont Board and the Town Board, because this commission is a commission comprised of members from both and covers both municipalities. And it has a lot to do with the waterfront. It has a lot to do with preserving the waterfront, with trying to keep the development from getting so severe that it affects the quality of the water, the ability of plants to survive, and so on, because we derive a lot of benefit in Larchmont, as they do in the village of Mamaroneck, as they do in the city of Rye, from being a waterfront community. You mess up the water, you messed up your community.
Right.
So whether it's the on-land part of the water, if you will, the coastal zone, actually, that's flooded during the tides, or just adjacent to it, or it's out in the water. You don't want to mess that up, because if you do, you're messing up where you live. So the Coastal Zone Management Commission and the plan is very clear about what kinds of impacts should be allowed. It's not a no-build plan. It's a plan it's got to be controlled in the interest of preserving what is good about the water and good about the waterfront. And they were unanimous certainly on the 40 Ocean development. This is not a good idea.
Because of coastal zoning.
Because of coastal zone concerns, and there are lists of concerns, and there are coastal zone management plan in Larchmont and town of Mamaroneck, my memory is a pretty thick document. So there may have been some things that slid through or skipped through or somehow managed to get shoved through. My sense of it is that the election of Sarah is the community saying, this is not good. Whatever you all are doing in the village board here in Larchmont, in the town board up in right where we're sitting right now, or in the planning commission in either one of these places, watch out, because people are upset with the idea of cramming more people into the village, which will only push the school board to do more of their, quote, flexible zoning. And I know they withdrew that proposal. And they said, well, we're not going to do flex zoning for 2018, 19. Yeah, but it doesn't. Hello, people. That doesn't mean that it's forever off the table.
You know, we had in Pine Brook, there was an apartment building built that probably has children in it. Then across 95, there was a huge apartment development.
Yes.
That's got to have children in it. I mean, but we can't control what these other places do. And now Hampshire, they want to build, and those children would come to our schools, wouldn't they?
Why not? And the village of Mamaroneck, compliments of Mayor Tom Murphy and the board, has installed now a moratorium on new building permits. If you've been down to over, what's that, Il Castello, which is sort of on the post road as it comes around the bend and goes under the railroad tracks, there are 2 gigantic apartment buildings that are there. They were permitted and they're now built. Wow. just in terms of what this does to the school district. And the school budget this year is up, I don't know, 5%, 4.5%. The tax warrant is up by that amount this year. And they said there are now 600 children. There's a whole primary school's worth of kids that have been added over the space of the last, I don't know, 5 or 6,
years.
2013 or something like
Okay.
that. But all the point of that is, the more you build, the more you allow the small houses to be torn down or the large house to be torn down and multiple houses to be put in, the more crowded the whole thing's going to be.
No, but how can you, so we have people active in Larchmont that don't want this, but we have no say about what happens in Hampshire.
Well, the Village of Mamaroneck has got a moratorium in for the moment.
Oh, so Hampshire can't go forward?
I think that's the significance of that, because I think most of Hampshire, if not all of it, is in the Village of Mamaroneck and not in the town of Mamaroneck.
Okay.
So people
that's a good
people are
thing.
waking. Well, I mean, but the point is, and I think this is part of sort of the bigger picture. You got to wake up, right? If you put apartment buildings up and down the street in every location, or if you put gigantic houses up and down the street in every location, and you overload the place with people, kids, and traffic, this will become, forgive me for saying this, Queens.
Well, the traffic on the weekend is horrible.
You can't go anywhere on the weekend around here. You can't go down the post road. You certainly can't get on 95. That's a danger zone right there. I mean, it's just crowded. It's cramped.
Right.
People up county, I'm not sure, they're not looking at the same thing. They're thinking, well, I'm going to sell off my back 40, which was a farm or a horse farm or something. Maybe so. But over time, you will face this sort of problem. But we're facing it now.
Right.
And we have that new apartment building in the town of Mamaroneck right across next to the water tanks and the garbage dump. And there are new apartments that went up in the village, affordable housing that went up in the village right on the railroad tracks. And people are coming in saying, well, I can take this little 2,100 square foot house and make it a 6,000 square foot house. And the answer has to be, no, you can't. If it's out of scale with the neighborhood, it's out of scale with the neighborhood. Something has to be done, and I think that's the message. And I think people need to be thinking about that and saying to themselves, well, if I really want to preserve this and I want my kids to grow up in what I think I bought into, you got to do something about it, because if you just sit around, the developers have a huge incentive, right? It's cash on the barrel head kind of thing.
Right.
To cram it up.
Well, how long can a moratorium last?
In the Village of Mamaroneck, I don't know what their legal advice is. I can't remember what we did in Larchmont when we reviewed the zoning code in 2002, 2003. I think the advice was, don't do it more than like 3 months at a time, and you can get a couple of extensions, but don't think you can do it for like 10 years, because it's not going to work.
That would be nice if you could do it for 10 years.
10 years of status quo, then my kids are out of school, I move out of town, and then leave the problem to somebody else. So.
Well,
So now the Planning Commission, a couple of weeks ago, there was a success for people who were in the Preserve Larchmont line of thinking, of which I number myself, and I think Catherine is as well. There was a success in front of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission had the choice, I believe, to say that with respect to the 40 Ocean property, either we'll do a short form environmental impact statement, EIS, or long form. Long form is much more detailed, requires much more information, requires a little information about where the Coastal Zone Management Commission is, and other things that play into whether something is environmentally sound or not. And the long form takes a lot of work. I don't know how expensive it is. I'm sure it's not cheap. And it gives the members of the community a chance to look at what it is the developer is actually proposing. So it's one thing for his developer to say, well, I'm going to put 4 houses or 10 houses or whatever it is on this plot of land. It's another thing to see the plan laid out in front of you.
Oh,
and
they have to show the actual
and
plan.
to have an opportunity to comment on the substance of the text or the drawings from an environmental point of view. That's a big deal.
Because you have to have an angle, right? You can't just say you don't like it.
Well, you should, I'm sure lots of people say they don't like a lot of things, but in a process, You know, you can stand up and say that, but I don't think that's going to count for very
Right.
much when the commission goes back to consider what it needs to do.
Whereas if you can throw the environmental word around.
Well, yeah, but you know, you need to be thoughtful. I think you need to be thoughtful. That's what we did with IKEA, remember? There were how many people? Hundreds of people who stood up at those IKEA hearings in New Rochelle. Remember, the mayor, who was then Tim Idoni, who's now the county clerk, thought this was going to be like a one night or 2 nights of hearings.
And then
And
Larchmont got
oh
involved.
my goodness, it went on for, I don't remember how many sessions there were. Got to be 6 or 10 or something like that session. Just everybody had a comment. And that was a draft environmental impact statement put together by IKEA that, if my memory serves me right, was 1 volume like that and maybe 1 like that. Huge.
Wow.
Tons of detail. That's where we got the buzzwords that they wanted. They expected 2 million vehicles in that little piece of land. In that little teeny piece of land. Where were these people coming from? How are they going to get there? 2 million.
On Palmer Avenue, obviously.
Well, Palmer Avenue and 95, and there was no exit on 95. They have to go down into New Rochelle and then come back. Oh, can you imagine 2 million vehicles? What's that, 70,000 a day?
So you mean the benefit, at least there, was by them having to give all the information, then one could find consequences that weren't obvious.
Well, one could challenge the quality of the information and find consequences. Now, that was a huge commercial development. I don't think at 40 Ocean we're talking about IKEA, but we are talking about something which is potentially out of scale. And if anything was ever out of scale, IKEA was it. What was the thing that I said in the first hearing? It was like putting a size 12 foot into a size 8 shoe or something like that. Just this gigantic foot that was going to come down this little teeny area.
So it is exciting.
There's work to be done.
But there's some kind of movement going on, which hopefully will make things better. And
You need to really consider these are issues that need work and they need thought, and you need to know. It doesn't mean you're against development. It means that there are things that are in scale and there are things that are out of scale. So that's the way I look at it.
So let's end on a positive note.
Yes.
Tell me about your tie, your New York Yankees tie.
I'm wearing my Yankees tie tonight because I don't know how many more nights I'll be able to wear it. But have they won 17 out of the last 18 or 18 out of the last 19?
Oh my gosh.
And tonight they play Boston in the Bronx. And this is tonight Boston, tomorrow, and then Thursday Boston. And who knows what's going to happen.
I see. So you had to
So
wear
I'm
it today.
wearing the tie today just in case.
Well, go Yankees. And thank you, Ken, and thank you to the talent that's on the real talent's on the other side of the camera. So thank you so much.
Thank you.